Imagine getting into your vehicle and driving for 10 years without ever checking whether you are actually getting closer to your destination. Most people would call that foolish. Yet many believers do exactly that in their spiritual lives. They pray, they attend church, they read their Bible, and they call Jesus Lord, assuming those routines equal forward momentum. But if you ask them a simple, direct question, are you closer to immortality today than you were exactly 1 year ago? Many would not know how to answer. Scripture repeatedly teaches that believers are on a journey. A journey has a specific destination, and if there is a destination, there must be measurable progress along the way. If immortality is the destination, we need to know whether we are moving toward it or away from it. Identifying the actual evidence of progress is critical. Without it, a believer can easily spend years silently drifting away from the hope of salvation, all while believing they are secure. Let's start with the invitation Jesus gives every disciple. The purpose of discipleship is imitation. The goal is to study Christ, observe Christ, and ultimately imitate Christ, rather than merely holding admiration for him. In Matthew 19:21, Jesus told the rich young ruler, "Come, follow me." Then, in Matthew 11:29, he said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." To know what we are supposed to imitate, we look at what Jesus was actually doing. We find the ultimate benchmark for our own progress by looking directly at his earthly development. Luke 2:52 says, "And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man." The Lord never sinned. He never violated God's law, yet he still grew. The first sign of spiritual progress is increasing wisdom, the active ability to recognize deception, discern what pleases God, and choose righteousness consistently. Hebrews 5:14 teaches that mature believers have their senses trained to distinguish good from evil. The second evidence is increasing stature. Stature is a person's spiritual load-bearing capacity, measuring how much weight a believer can carry. As this internal structure expands, they handle larger assignments without collapsing, remaining faithful through intense pressures and heavier responsibilities. True spiritual progress is found in the active expansion of your internal capacity to discern the truth and successfully carry the weight of God's assignments. Expanding that capacity requires a specific mechanical process, and it begins with what a believer consumes. 1 Peter 2:2 gives the exact instruction. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation. A healthy diet produces growth. As you mature, your appetite physically changes. You lose your taste for spiritual junk food and novelty, beginning to strictly crave sincere truth. Purification remains impossible without action. Listen to how 1 Peter 1:22 connects the two. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, every act of obedience actively pushes death out. A growing believer becomes increasingly compliant, increasingly surrendered, and responds much faster to God's correction. Once fed by truth and activated by obedience, a believer enters a necessary testing phase, the fires of sanctification. God allows these tests. When this pressure arrives, hidden fears, internal hardness, and quiet weaknesses are forced to the surface so they can be cleansed. You will know you are progressing when you can successfully endure the exact difficulties that used to break you. The temptation that once controlled you no longer dominates you. A pure diet of truth fuels the obedience required to withstand these refining fires. Surviving that pressure is what hardens and permanently secures your expanded spiritual capacity. All of these metrics point to one overarching standard of measurement, whether you are measurably thinking, loving, and responding more like Jesus Christ. The Apostle Paul modeled this singular focus perfectly, locking his eyes on the ultimate destination. He laid out his entire strategy in Philippians 3, saying, "I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection, and so somehow to attain to the resurrection of the dead." So evaluate your own journey right now. Are you wiser than you were last year? Are you stronger? Are you more sanctified? Notice the question is not, are you busier? Nobody accidentally drifts into immortality. The journey demands a deliberate, highly intentional pursuit of transformation. Abandon the safety of complacent routines. Actively pursue these evidences of growth. Keep your eyes fixed entirely on the ultimate destination. the redemption of the body, immortality, and the resurrection of the dead.